What's up, everybody? My name is David Jagneaux, aka the Jaggernaut, and today we are talking about Captain America and the Avengers, specifically the Sega Genesis version. This game came out originally in the arcade and then was ported over to home consoles, particularly the Genesis and Super Nintendo. The NES did get a version of this game as well, but it was actually a totally different action platformer, not a beat 'em up like you see here. So I'm playing the Genesis version. That's the version we're going to be talking about. That's the version that I have. I primarily played single player, but it does feature two-player co-op as well. You can play as Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Vision in this game. Obviously came out in 1992 for the Genesis, long before the MCU ever existed, and long before there was even a glint in the eye of anyone at Disney or Marvel about what the future would be for Marvel franchises. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what this game is all about. This is my kind of rambly, unscripted, one take for the most part review. That's how I like to do a lot of my videos, just kind of talk over the footage and discuss the game as I'm playing it. I have a physical copy, as you can see, with the case, manual, and cartridge all in pretty good shape. The Genesis version of the game is the one that you're seeing on screen, and it's pretty good. It's a pretty decent arcade port. You can jump, you can punch, you have your special ability with each character. Captain America can, of course, throw his shield. And there's dash attacks and things like that. Pretty typical beat 'em up stuff. And the game is visually not too bad. I think they did a good job of adapting it for, a markedly less powerful hardware as opposed to an arcade machine that would obviously be a little more powerful, as is the case with a lot of the 90s games that were ports of arcade games. The home console version in this one is actually pretty solid. I think they did a nice job. It's a fun game, it's simple, but it does a good job of kind of communicating what a Marvel beat 'em up is like. And I think it's exciting because, obviously Marvel Cosmic Invasion was announced this year for 2025, and that game looks extremely fun and fantastic. But not a lot of people know or remember playing this particular one here, which came out in the 90s, and it's kind of an early prototype, I guess you could say. Obviously, it's like, 30 years prior, over 30 years prior to Marvel Cosmic Invasion, but still kind of an interesting curiosity, a piece of game history that's fun to dive into here. And so there's only 4 characters in this one. I started out with Captain America, but each time you die, you get to pick a different character if you'd like. So that's kind of a nice effect. One little trick that I figured out is if you're playing single player, if you start the game with 2 controllers plugged in and then you wait until you're on your last life with your first character, you can then join the game as player 2 and get a fresh set of lives. So even though your first character, even though player 1 would get a game over, player 2 would pick up with a fresh set of lives. So that kind of is a trick where you can get sort of double the lives if you're playing solo, which is kind of cool. This level here, level 2, you get to switch to a flying segment, which I thought was really neat. Iron Man and Vision fly, as you can see here, but Captain America and Hawkeye kind of stand on like these flying contraptions instead. I really like the parallax scrolling in the background of this level, and I thought the visuals and everything were really nice. It is a nice, visually appealing kind of backdrop and everything like that, and it really does convey the sense of movement and everything like that. So I always love when games like beat 'em ups or platformers or action games throw in sections that feel like they're other genres. I love stuff like that. I think it's a neat way to mix things up and keep it fresh and interesting. There's a little fight here with this spaceship spawning enemies, and you have to kind of dodge and move around. It would be nice if there was a little bit faster movement, maybe if some of the scrolling was a little faster and you can move your character a little bit more quickly. But overall, I think the section's really well done, and they did a nice job of mixing up the gameplay. And, a lot of the levels have things like this where it mixes things up. It's not always just scrolling left to right fighting enemies. So I appreciate that. I think, there's a good variety of gameplay mechanics in this one. Here's a pretty fun boss fight where you can fly around, dodge, the hand moving around. And, I enjoyed playing as Iron Man in this section because it felt very true to the character. It wasn't like Captain America riding on a flying contraption, like I mentioned before. This is something you could actually see Iron Man doing in the comics or in the cartoon and now the movies and things like that. It feels very true to character. It feels very appropriate and, pretty iconic for something that Iron Man might end up doing. So I love stuff like that where they're able to accommodate for what those characters are known for in their kind of ideal state. rather than trying to adapt them to fit the game design that they had in mind. You know, it feels like the game accommodates the character and their strengths rather than, you know, just trying to squish them into a, you know, a round block into a square hole type of situation. So I think that was a nice decision on their part. This is a Data East game, so they're obviously very well known for pretty tremendous arcade games. A lot of them have good, solid home console ports. This one included, I would say, is a pretty solid one. And, you know, it's a lot more fun playing co-op. I did play a little bit of multiplayer with my son, and so I think, you know, they did a nice job of giving you enough screen real estate to move around and really kind of explore your characters and let them sort of adapt to situations and kind of take advantage of what they're going to be good at doing. You can see here with Hawkeye, obviously he can shoot. He throws like a rock in the air if you use his special in the air, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice instead of just having him shoot another arrow. Kind of strange. But yeah, I enjoyed playing him because he's obviously, you know, feels very good to play from a distance. And so I think that, going back to what I was saying, you know, Captain America feels great up close. Iron Man and Vision can feel good up close, but I think Hawkeye, they did a nice job of, you know, pacing the animation versus the input to make him feel good and look good at, you know, shooting from a little bit of range. So you see there, whenever you run out of health, you can switch to another character. I'm going to summon Vision now, and so he kind of shoots lasers as well. You know, it's interesting because all the characters kind of have the same move set, the same button inputs, and yeah, but I think they did a good job. This is a solid beat 'em up. Definitely worth a look, and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think. What other games you want to see? Comment down below.